This episode was brought to you by Fitbod. There's a bit of controversy in the world of strength and conditioning research around this question. What is core strength? This seems like it should be a straightforward question. Just define the muscles of the core and find a way to measure their strength, but it's more complex than that. First off, there's no definitive list of core muscles. Some scientists include all the muscles that attach all the way up the vertebrae, up the cervical spine, while some only include the deep abdominal muscles like the transverse abdominis. And second, many of these muscle actions don't lend themselves to straightforward strength evaluation. It's easy enough for the rectus abdominis or for the lumbar extensors, but way harder for, say, the multifidus. And these are important caveats because it allows research and fitness products to claim that they improve core strength when, in reality, maybe only one core muscle was affected by their efforts. So in this video, we'll go over the different ways of imagining core anatomy and try to make sense of the core strength paradox. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is Patrick, and this channel is all about anatomy and how we learn about it. Now, before we get into the different schools of thought around core anatomy, we need to talk about what common ground they all share. In general, the core is a set of muscles that stabilize the spine, increase pressure within the abdomen, and support limb movement. And the fact that we're narrowing in on muscles only is an important detail. We do have ligaments along our spine, but without muscles, our spines would be incredibly fragile. An experiment from 2004 showed that the spine would collapse under 20 newtons of compression without muscular support. For reference, we can produce around 140 newtons of compression during walking, over 3,000 newtons during sit-ups, 6,000 during rowing, and have recorded over 36,000 newtons for athletes doing heavy lifts. Our delicate little spines need this core musculature to hold it together. And depending on which definition you're using, there are up to 29 pairs of muscles that stabilize the spine, hip, and pelvis that might be considered as core muscles. But to understand the problem, we need to split these muscles into groups based on the movement of the spine. Global muscles are generally long muscles and can produce a lot of torque. Muscles like the rectus abdominis, erector spinae, and psoas major. On the other hand, local muscles are generally shorter, attach directly to vertebrae, and create stability of individual vertebral segments. These muscles include the transverse abdominis, the diaphragm, the quadratus lumborum, and internal obliques. Now, this is our first spot of controversy. In general, global muscles move the spine while local muscles, depending on how they contract, stabilize the spine. But Patrick, you say as you notice the QL and internal obliques on the local muscles list, those muscles do move the spine. Hey, good eye, and you know what? I'm proud of you for catching that. That's our next point of confusion because the local muscles need more contact. Only the transverse abdominis, or what I'll call the TA for the rest of the video, and multifidus earn the title of primary local muscles, or muscles that always need to contract to stabilize the spine. The TA is the one that looks like a corset, and it's the deepest of the abdominal muscles, attaching to the iliac crest of the pelvis, inguinal ligament, thoracic and lumbar spinous process via the thoracolumbar fascia, and the linea alba anteriorly. Good luck making the flashcard for that one. The multifidus is a little different. These tiny muscles cross anywhere from 1 to 3 vertebrae and originate on the vertebral arch of one vertebrae and insert on the spinous process of another, more inferior vertebrae. We find these things all the way from cervical to lumbar, and since they have such short moment arms, they don't contribute to gross spinal motion. No matter what movement the rest of the body is doing, the TA and multifidus fire a split second before everything else, giving us a base of spinal stability and making them universally agreed upon core muscles. These other local core muscles are secondary stabilizers, since yes, they do keep the core in a stable position when they fire, but they can also move the spine. And here's the deal with that. When they contract, other muscles contract at the same time, and it results in a spine that doesn't budge. And of course, different definitions of core musculature go past the ones I listed here. I'm basing my list on a paper published in the Strength and Conditioning Journal in 2007. That's linked in the doobly-doo if you'd like to see it. These global muscles then are muscles that move the spine into flexion, extension, rotation, or bending. Kinesiologists have noticed that these muscles have long levers and moment arms, making them capable of producing a bunch of torque and power, and they have the physiology to match it too. Global muscles have a greater proportion of fast twitch type 2 muscle fibers, while local muscles have more slow twitch type 1 muscle fibers for greater endurance. That brings us to the last part of confusion. The strength of these muscles. Like, let's say that we've decided to define only local muscles as our core muscles. In order for an exercise to truly be a core strength exercise, according to that review from 2007, it must challenge muscles to stabilize the spine through contraction and by increasing pressure within the abdomen. The misconception is that if an exercise requires core stability, like a front squat, then it's a core exercise. Same with functional exercises. Like when a football lineman does chest flies and a split squat, their core muscles are certainly active, but not all functional exercises are core exercises. And the same could be said about any exercise or really any daily activity. You had to engage your core during the exercise, but that wasn't necessarily a core exercise. That's kind of like saying that just because your pizza had a tomato slice on it, then it's a salad. Unfortunately, when we leave the fitness world and enter the realm of kinesiology research, our definitions are still all different. Like, our methods for measuring a strength or rehab program's effectiveness are all over the place. The methodology isn't consistent, and the vast majority of research is done on patients with low back pain, not healthy adults or athletes. So for instance, we could do a prospective study where we measure transverse abdominis cross-sectional area on MRI before and after a training program, but that would tell us muscle size, not necessarily strength. Or you could do some kind of endurance test, like max number of sit-ups or prone planks for a minute, but then you're involving global core muscles and you're conflating endurance and strength, which aren't the same thing. Okay, well, we could use clinical biofeedback as an endpoint then. A common physical therapy exercise involves doing core exercises with a blood pressure cuff under the small of your back. The less the needle moves, supposedly the less your lumbar spine moves and the more core muscles are working, right? My point is, oftentimes when we say that we're evaluating core strength clinically, we're evaluating neither the local core anatomy nor strength. The logical follow-up question is, so what if we mix up words from time to time? What should I do about it? Unfortunately, it's not that simple either. There is no best exercise, but there are different exercises. In my mind, the biggest benefit of core exercise is preventing back pain. I couldn't care less about showy ab muscles. Honestly, forget a six-pack. Exercise because you love your body and you want your back to feel healthy forever. We have years of research at this point showing that a technique called abdominal hollowing strengthens the transverse abdominis, and that training this muscle leads to a greater lumbar and sacroiliac joint stability. But as a reminder, the vast majority of that research was conducted on participants with low back pain. But there are progressions of that exercise, like we could move our limbs during hollowing, or if we wanted a challenge, we could do abdominal bracing, activating all the abdominal muscles at the same time. All right, so to circle back to the opening, we've landed in a weird kind of paradoxical spot still. If you define the core based on stability provided by local muscles, you're almost certainly not measuring strength. And if you measure core strength via the motion from global muscles, you're ignoring spinal stability, which is the point of the core. So knowing that this paradox was a thing, I did a little bit of extra investigation based on this question. What about training on unstable surfaces? Like, this has always been advocated to me as a great way to improve core strength. So what does the research say? So far, the research around training on unstable surfaces has mixed results, and just like before, there's nuance regarding what information we can pull from each study. For example, a study published in the Journal of Sport Rehabilitation in 2019 brought in healthy adults and had them do a bunch of isometric core exercises, some of which were done on an unstable surface. Then they used real-time ultrasound imaging to measure changes in muscle thickness during those exercises. And as you probably guessed, this is a similar technology to seeing fetuses in utero, but this time it's narrowed in on muscles. They saw some muscles, including the transverse abdominis, get thicker during certain exercises, meaning they contracted harder during exercise on unstable surface. And that's a fun fact, but there are still multiple steps between this observation and evidence that training on unstable surfaces will lead to greater stabilization of the spine over stable surfaces. And look, I know that's a mouthful to say, but we need this level of nuance to decipher what studies are actually saying. Pay close attention to this experiment from the Scandinavian Journal of Medicine and Science in Sports from 2015. They took 39 teenage soccer players and gave them a 9-week-long core strengthening program to do during their normal season. Half of the group did exercises on an unstable surface, while some did them normally. They measured core strength with isometric trunk flexion and extension, which looks like something you'd find in the pit of despair, and there was a significant difference in trunk extension strength, but not trunk flexion strength after the 9-week program. They concluded that trunk muscle strength could be improved by training on an unstable surface, which is a fair conclusion given their data. Global core muscles, the spine extensors, got stronger, but again, that only works if your definition of the core is based on spinal motion, not spinal stability. Uncertainty aside, unstable surfaces can still be a great tool for training balance, especially for older folks who are at risk of falling. But just anecdotally, I've seen this concept go way too far. Like power lifters try to do split jerks onto balance pad, which is dumb and dangerous. please don't do that. You know what's not a dumb decision though, is downloading this week's sponsor, Fitbod. Once you get past the incredibly silly name, it's actually a useful app that builds you a workout program based on the equipment you have and the time that you can give and the strength goals that you want to accomplish. It's actually been awesome to use during shelter in place while all the gyms are closed. I asked them to sponsor this video and they agreed, so you can get 25% off an annual subscription and help support the channel by going to fitbod.me/corporis and using the promo code Corporis at checkout. If you want more exercise science and musculoskeletal related videos, check out this playlist here. Otherwise, if you learned something today, subscribe and hit the bell icon so you get notified when I post a new video. Have fun, be good. Thanks for watching.